At home, the FBI expands its questioning of Arab American business, community, and student leaders, claiming that the interviews are designed to assure Arab Americans that the FBI will protect them from racially motivated attacks.
Thank you for coming down to FBI headquarters, Ali. We're here to protect you from harassment, Ali. We just want to ask you some questions.
How are your studies going, Ali? How's your wife?
While the FBI claims the interviews are designed to protect Arab Americans, many people who have been questioned charge that the interviews are a form of intimidation and harassment.
Do you recognize any of the names on this list?
Do you know any Iraqis?
Do you know any terrorists?
Do you know anyone who's planning to commit a terrorist act? Have you ever been involved in any terrorist activity?
What exactly does your Muslim Students Association do, Ali?
Ali, do you support the Bush administration policy in the Middle East?
Do you support the war against Iraq?
Violence directed at the Arab American community is escalating. Last week, the Middle Eastern restaurant in Los Angeles was firebombed. In Detroit, an Arab American teenager was accosted and severely beaten when he spoke Arabic in public.
What do you think of Saddam Hussein?
Do you support Israel's right to exist?
Do you support the PLO?
Arab leaders refer to a leaked FBI document outlining a contingency plan for a mass roundup of Arab Americans. The possible use of detention centers have led many to compare the situation with the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II.
I have nothing to tell you. I have nothing to tell you.
On January 7th, the FBI authorized its agents across the country to interview Arab American business and community leaders. In 2 weeks, there have been over 200 FBI visits to members of the Arab American community. 50 incidents of violence against Arab Americans have been recorded at the CCR since mid-February 1991.
There are Arab Americans out there who don't speak the language as well, who may be intimidated by the fact that here this government official comes to their house and they just sort of open the door just to avoid, anything that they might think might develop out of it. They do not know that they could, in effect, say, get lost.
I think this connection in terms of what happened during World War II against Japanese Americans and what is taking place right now against Arab Americans, that connection is a very important one. Because I think when we people always talk about, we must learn from history in order not to repeat it. And what is sad to see is some repetition of that history. But I think people are really taking action right now to counter that flow so that we don't repeat history. Because when we see, what was the anti-Japanese hysteria that was built up? It started with, the government demonizing a particular Japanese leader, or demonizing Japanese, or undermining their culture, undermining their national characteristics or whatever, and it getting played out in terms of this machoism and this jingoism in terms of our enemy. It's a picture of a Japanese. So therefore, when you see a Japanese American, never mind that they might have been your 3 or 4 generations, they are instantly the enemy. And a lot of private violence gets committed against them. And finally, we saw in terms of government taking action about interning, a couple of 100,000 of people in concentration camps, and voiding any constitutional rights that they might have as citizens. And I think when we see a similar kind of situation right now happening in terms of, Saddam Hussein being the new Hitler, the Iraqi people, being a certain way, and the anti-Arab violence that's taking place across the country right now, I think, it is not paranoia or it is not overreaction to make that connection and to counter that. So I think there are, activities taking place both in Washington, D.C., as well as in major cities across the country to have a civil rights coalition that will counter, both anti-Arab violence and harassment by the FBI, as well as FBI curtailment of civil liberties of political people around the country. So I think those two communities are really coming together and forging a unity there.
The evacuees cooperated wholeheartedly. The many loyal among them felt that this was a sacrifice they could make in behalf of America's war effort. Now, this brief picture is actually the prologue to a story that is yet to be told. The full story will begin to unfold when the raw lands of the desert turn green. It will be fully told only when circumstances permit the loyal American citizens once again to enjoy the freedom we in this country cherish. We are protecting ourselves without violating the principles of Christian decency.
I was on the West Coast in 1940, and when the war broke out, I felt all the hate and the hysteria that the Arab Americans are currently experiencing. It's up to us now, the Japanese Americans, tell our government that they are terribly stupid if they do this again to another ethnic group.
In South Vietnam at that time, the information was censored, so I didn't really understand the reason the war started and how the United States got involved. But for us, the average Vietnamese, we don't want to see any foreign army in our country. I think it should be said the new order to the world rather than the new world order. And the first victim could be Iraq in the global strategy of the United States.
I strongly oppose it, both on moral grounds and simply for the on behalf of people of all world. I mean, especially people of third world countries who have right to self-determination. In fact, this is another phase of neocolonialism, and I strongly oppose that.